Okay, everybody, welcome to part 2 of lesson 2. This video is going to cover the types of research, at least the types of research that we're going to look at in this class and we'll be talking about in this class. The three most commonly types of research in psychology are those three on the screen: descriptive research, correlational research, and experimental research. And we're going to go through these individually over the next 5 minutes or so. Descriptive research is the very simplest method of psychological inquiry. This is always about describing behavior or some phenomenon. It is not used to support or disprove a theory. It is used in only describing or defining what behavior is, how often it occurs, which is the prevalence rate, so on and so forth. There are 3 types of descriptive research: observation, surveys and interviews, and case studies, and we're going to go through these as well. The 3 types of descriptive research are observation. Observation can be covert or overt. Covert observations are secret observations which are done without the subject knowing that they are being observed, or we have overt observations, which is known, but it's usually used without disturbing. I always tell my students that even if you are not actively disturbing the subject, you are usually psychologically disturbing the subject in their normal behavior. And I always use the method that our principals use in observing teachers. When a teacher walks into the classroom to observe a teacher, or when a principal walks into the classroom to observe a teacher, do the students act as they would if it was just the students and the teacher? When the answer is no. That is an overt observation. How could we covertly observe teachers? I'm going to let you think about that, and we will talk about that in class. Surveys and interviews are where you ask people what they think, their opinions, even things about their own behavior. It is often the best and the quickest way to gain information, and it's usually done after an overt observation. And then we have case studies, and we're going to talk about some specific case studies in this class next time. This is in-depth looks at a single individual, and we're actually going to look at one called HM. He was a man that had amnesia. And this is going to provide a detailed look at a person's life, and then we can then use some other methods of research to then support or disprove our theory. The next type of research is correlational research. Correlational research tells us about the relationship between 2 variables, and be reminded that variable is anything that can and will be changed in research. So it's going to tell us either if the variables have a relationship, and if they negatively impact each other, if they positively impact each other. This is named for the statistical technique used to analyze the data, and we're going to talk about statistics in the next lesson. But without getting into specifics, correlation is the number that expresses the strength. The correlation coefficient always falls between +1 and -1. The closer the number is to +1, the stronger the relationship. The sign, positive or negative, expresses the direction of the relationship. Positive means that as a variable moves in one way, the other variable also moves the same way, the same direction. This does not mean that the relationship is positive, like a positive relationship between a boy and a girlfriend. This is that one moves in one way and the other moves. They can both decrease, but it would still be a positive relationship. Negative, on the other hand, negative relationship or correlation means that as one increases, the other decreases. They move in opposite directions. And then we have a zero correlation, which means that there is no systematic relationship between the 2 variables. Over this lesson, I want you to actually start thinking about some of those or some variables that maybe have each of those types of correlation, and we're going to talk about those in class. This is we express the degree of the correlation on a scatter plot, and this is essentially what the scatter plots are going to look like. You see that we have a strong relationship here, a negative relationship, and a positive one. Weak, there is essentially very little correlation, and then of course we have a negative, which means that the data is all over the place. So important things to remember, that correlation does not equals causation. Just because correlation occurs does not mean that the theory essentially can be proven. We may be able to predict one event based on the occurrence of another, but it does not always tell us that it's always going to happen. And I use the example of, does studying for a test always mean that you're going to do well on the test? Absolutely not. Remember that there are always other factors that have to be pulled into account, and that usually are not measured when looking at correlation. The last type of research I'm going to talk about, which is actually going to be talked about further in the next video, is experimental research. And this is during highly controlled conditions, usually in a lab, and it's done with experimentation. Experimentation is carefully regulated procedures in which variables are manipulated. And we see in the psychological experimental research that there is an independent variable and a dependent variable. And I will talk about this more in the next video. And I will see you at part 3.